in New Mexico in 1930, our next historic speaker, Dolores Huerta, is a labor leader, civil rights activist, and feminist with a lifelong commitment to ending economic injustice. In 1962, she co-founded the National Farm Workers Association, which later became the United Farm Workers, with Cezar Chavez. An instrumental lobbyist, she helped lead the passage of numerous historic labor laws, including an act that granted farm workers in California the right to collectively organize and bargain for better wages. In 1965, she directed a national boycott during the Delano grape strike, which resulted in the entire California table grape industry signing a 3-year collective bargaining agreement with the United Farm Workers. Her words on the epidemic in the fields just this past year described the ways in which women farm workers, particularly undocumented workers, are especially vulnerable to sexual violence. Reading today as Dolores Huerta is Mikaela Gonzalez. Growing up in both Massachusetts and Baja California, Mexico, Ms. Gonzalez has always felt a duality of belonging on both sides of the border in both English and Spanish. She has channeled this biculturalism into her political art and activist work, and currently studies activism and Latina resistance at Hampshire College. Her dream is to live in Mexico City and paint radical and decolonial community murals, as well as improve her public speaking and leadership skills for her activist future. Please join me in welcoming Mikaela Gonzalez as Dolores Huerta.
Sexual harassment is an epidemic in the fields. I believe that one of the reasons that sexual harassment was not talked about openly is because women themselves feel very ashamed, because they know they have to do it, perform sexual favors, to be able to keep a job. The whole family can get fired if a woman complains that she's being sexually harassed. It's very common, and not just the young women. I have testimonies from women that were in their 50s and even going on their 60s, who were worried that because of their age, they wouldn't be hired anymore. So they literally had to make an appointment with a foreman or the supervisor at a hotel before the season started to be able to keep that job. It's always an issue of violence that comes into play here, because they feel that if the husband knows or the brother knows, that they might blame the woman, that she is the one that precipitated the advances, that she was responsible in some way. And so that's why sometimes they keep it to themselves. Sexual harassment, as we know it, is not limited to any culture. It happens every day in many, many places in the United States. I think what makes farm worker women more vulnerable is, number one, they work in isolated places and that the jobs they have are sort of entry level. It's very hard for them to get a job anywhere else, so they have to try to keep these jobs. They're especially vulnerable if they're undocumented. When you think about this type of sexual harassment or rape, it's always about power of men over women. It is a type of common slavery when you can have the employer that can impose himself upon his workers and demand sexual favors for them. So this is a culture where the foreman or the supervisor is more likely to be the one harassing the woman or assaulting the woman. And management is very responsible because, number one, they don't take responsibility for their workers in the first place, and they will often take the word of the foreman or the manager against the woman if she does not come forward. And women know this. They know that they are not going to be heard. They know that no one is going to be there to support them and to protect them. And of course, this adds to the reluctance of them to come forward. The fact is that many of them don't speak English. A lot of them don't know the laws. They don't even know that they can report sexual harassment and that their employer can be responsible for that. I believe that once they know that they can have some sort of support system, that there's an organization like the United Farm Workers Union or like a group called Líderes Campesina that supports the rights of farm worker women, and when they know that they have some type of security, some type of protection, that they'll come forth. I believe that's why it's so important to have women involved in the union. The best way to curb this type of macho sexist culture is to make sure that women are involved. So it is an epidemic, unfortunately. And while I believe that with knowledge, that when women know there's a number they can call, and they know it's confidential, that nobody needs to know until the perpetrators come confronted, And as we know, many of those cases are settled because the companies don't want the world to know that their workers were sexually harassed in the workplace. So there's a little light at the end of the tunnel on this, but it's going to take mass education. But I think it's not just the women we have to educate about their rights and how they're going to be protected and how they can defend themselves. But we also have to educate the men. And not only the managers and the foremen, but also husbands and the people of the community. The one thing I've learned in my 60 years of organizing is that nothing changes until the people stand up, and that they have to make it happen. And the more the people feel the power they have in themselves, that they are the ones responsible for making these changes, then the changes will happen. Thank you.